Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio's Fireside Chat. This is Fireside Chat number 26. Maria Al-Masani. I hope I pronounced that right. Maria, is that pronounced?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. Awesome. I'm Brian, the host, and I'm here with our special guest, Maria Al-Masani, as well as Karen. So we're gonna just sort of chit chat and get to know each other a bit.
You were enough to invite me, so.
I was. I think that it's always better with three. So, and I know. Never mind. Let's move on. Maria, first of all, thank you for taking the time to come and join us, especially on such short notice. So I want to say thank you for making the time.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the second thing is, well, I guess we should probably get to know who you are. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do for those who may not be aware?
I'm Maria Al-Masani from Happy Yemens, and prior to that, Yemen Rights Monitor. And I was a CNN agent of change. I work on correcting misinformation and the media war on Yemen. And I am doing a lot of stuff about Gamergate because forgive my language, it's the same damn people lying about Yemen, lying about Ukraine, lying about Syria, lying about gamers. It's the same SJW establishment. So I have been putting videos about the problems with feminism, because today's feminism is not the same as the feminism back in the day of women moving out of the kitchen, having basic human rights, which is what we're fighting for in the Middle East. Today's feminism is simply another word for Marxism, and it hurts women more than it helps. It also hurts men. In Yemen, we are fighting a war against Islamists, Houthi and Al-Qaeda Islamists, and so we have Muslims fighting Islamists, and guess who supports the Islamists? These feminists, and I'm like wondering, how can these feminist activists support forced niqab and everything, and then these women, Muslim women, are shooting the terrorists, and the feminists cover up for the terrorists? I'm like, there is something fundamentally wrong with that, with these social justice warrior NGOs, media, etc. And at first I thought I was crazy until I saw Gamergate. I'm like, oh my god, there are more of us. So that's why I'm a strong supporter of those really heroic gamers who have been standing up to the social justice warrior media establishment, and I think we should really applaud them.
Oh, all right. That's great. So yeah, I saw that you were tweeting a lot about Gamergate, and I'm curious see, a lot of people wouldn't think that there is a greater sort of, point to Gamergate, even if you are one of those people that's really just focused on the games journalism part of it. And I think that you're touching on something that I find really interesting about the whole Gamergate controversy, which is the media establishment and the lies and the manipulation. So I want to, first off, I guess if we could talk a little bit about that more, but I also want to ask you, how did you find yourself involved with Gamergate? Because, I looked a little bit into your background, and you've dealt with a lot of human rights in, Yemen specifically, as well as even before that, you were a Miss Universe contestant, right? So
yeah.
It just seems like an interesting path that brought you to Gamergate. So if you could tell me a little bit about how you found that.
I just saw Gamergate, people were tweeting about media lying, and I'm like, wait a minute, the same BBC journalist was lying about Yemen. And I was checking, oh, Anita Sarkeesian went to the UN. I'm like, oh my god, the Houthis, the UN, gives all the humanitarian aid to the Islamist militia, and none of it gets to refugees or anyone else. I'm like, what? And the UN is like, accepts millions of bribes, and then they're saying they're going after Gamergate. I'm like, that's suspicious. Everyone who lied about Yemen, when I see people just randomly tweeting about Gamergate, actually it started, I think, with Lauren Southern. I lost my startup co-founder to Lauren Southern. my husband, he is a software engineer, and yeah, we both hate stupid games that feminism are making games unplayable. But that aside, he puts a woman, his colleague, a female engineer, liked a Lauren Southern video, and our friend is Filipino, religious, so she just put it up. She was like, "Oh my God, this makes sense." So my husband sent this to me. He was like, "Oh, this is about women stuff by my female engineer friend. You might like it. You're a woman." I'm like, "Oh, actually, thank you. This is the most logical thing I heard about women in like forever." And then my husband and our startup co-founder was a woman who discovered feminism in San Francisco, and we had the startup called Ardiso together, and our co-founder saw that I posted the Lauren Southern video on Facebook, and she just cut off all contact, and so we lost our co-founder. And I'm like, whoa, because of feminism? And she was like, I can't believe you would even post a Lauren Southern video on Facebook. Goodbye. I'm like, what the hell? And then another friend became quickly a former friend. I'm like, why all this emotional reaction? So I started actually looking at Lauren Southern's Twitter. I started following her on Twitter, other videos, and that's how I kind of saw the Gamergate stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, those journalists that I have been like fighting forever to expose lying about Yemen are lying about Gamergate. So I'm like, yeah, you know, and I'm also trying to show Yemenis more about Gamergate, because this is the same people who are lying about us are lying about other people. If somebody's a bad guy, they're going to be bad not just to one person, but this is their character. They're going to have more than one victim.
I have a question. You mentioned that they're lying about Yemen. Can you tell us in how, like, what is the narrative that the media is putting out there, and what is truth, just so that people can see the degree to which the media is spinning this stuff?
Okay, so the war in Yemen, we have an ex-dictator called Ali Saleh, or Ali Affash, and he wanted to go back into power. So we had a revolution. We got rid of him in the Arab Spring in 2012. So he then found the group that the SJWs found the biggest victim, the Houthis. Houthis are cave people. So of course they'll fall for primitive cave people. And the cave people decided to get money from Iran, so they shout death to America, death to Israel. Now, what's more seductive than death to America shouting cave people who are underprivileged to a social justice warrior?
Oh.
So the dictator, who had 6 wars with them, over money actually, he bought them off. He shelled and killed their women and children, then he bought them off and say, hey, you know what, social justice warriors love you. You poor cave people, you'll be the face of my regime. And so he worked with Bashar Assad, Russians, Iran, Hezbollah, other terrorist groups, and he trained his own army and the Houthi cavemen they had come from the caves of Mara near Sada. So he trained them in South Syria and northern Lebanon, Ka Valley. And then he had a coup in 2014, September 21st. He invaded Sana'a, then he started stabbing protesters. His people they went into my town, Taiz, and they started stabbing people, killing people, shooting women, shooting doctors. This like crazy cave barbarians. We just never saw anything like it. And they would scream like they have this baboon scream. I'm not America! I'm not listening! That's America! Ah! Like we also have baboons in Thai, so
that's a good
impression.
That was a really good impression of whatever that was.
Anyway, the narrative of the media is, just to be quick, eventually they started to attack Saudi, and Saudi realized armed cavemen who are in league with Al-Qaeda attacking their border is no fun, and the cavemen had started bombing got the Saleh army. They were attacking the legitimate government in Aden, who moved to the city of Aden, and the Saleh people started bombing the legitimate government, and Saudi was like, okay, we better save the legitimate government because cave people and Al-Qaeda shelling our border is no fun. So in March, a year ago from now, actually, Saudi joined the war. So March 2015, Saudi joined the war, and it wasn't the Houthis. The Houthi war started in September 2014, and the media calls it the Saudi war when we have been fighting and resisting the Houthis for months before. So it's the tribes, the legitimate government, you know, people, students, doctors, anyone who could grab a gun, formed militias to support the soldiers when there weren't enough government soldiers. Like, people are supporting the legitimate government of Hadi against the ex-dictator and his crazed Houthi cavemen and their social justice warrior fans. So people are talking about Sana'a. So just because, to give you an idea, the president is Sunni. Aden is a Sunni city. South and central Yemen are Sunni areas. Central Yemen has been fighting the Shia northern north. The Houthis and Ali Saleh are Shia. So it's the Shia area that has been attacking the Sunni parts of Yemen. And the revolution, what happened is Shia have a caste system, and it's not the first revolution. So the lower castes in the Shia caste, they always back the Sunnis because the elites go crazy. And they're like, okay, we had enough of those corrupt, really liberal elites. We want to join the rest of the people, the Sunnis that they're also oppressing, and together these two groups had the revolution, and they put a Sunni leader. And of course, this really upset and pissed off the Shia elites. And so the former dictator, the former king's family that was kicked out in the previous revolution, same thing. And the Cape people decided to go together against the regular people who are just tired, because the former dictator alone stole 60 billion from Yemen. These are corrupt thieves. People just want a normal government, normal life. People want to live like America. People want democracy. People want freedom, and they had enough. But here you have Obama's Iran deal. The money that Iran gets from lifting sanctions goes to, again, Saleh and the Houthis. So in a way, it's a Sunni region versus Shia region conflict. So, and of course, you know, Obama is just letting Iran get money to like continue the war, where any anti-Iran thing, anything about Shia doing something bad is silenced. For example, Houthis who are Shia, they basically burned down some churches in the Sunni area of Aden. And they also attacked synagogues, they attack Jews, they attack all minorities, they shoot people for being black. None of this gets onto the news because you can't say a bad thing about Shiites. You hear criticism on Saudi in the news, but you never hear criticism of Iran, which kills in 6 months what Saudi kills in 6 years. So it's like Obama's Iran deal. And this is why you have these groups who are lackeys of Obama, who Obama is very far left. You saw how he was kissing up to Che Guevara in Cuba and Castro's family and so on. Well, the same people, of course, don't like that Gamergate is attacking feminism because it's really Obama and fans, right?
Well, I don't know that it's Obama and fans, but I think that definitely there's a media narrative that is being dictated by people who have agendas, and there is definitely a lot of stuff that goes on in the Middle East that would be worthy of a Game of Thrones type treatment on, you know, in a like an 8-season TV series or something like that, because it is so complicated. Yet the narratives are always so simple that we're being presented with in the media, and the people who get to decide what gets disseminated are the people who are they have their agenda, they have what they want to have happen, and a lot of that does have to do with political alliances and all of that. So yeah, no, I couldn't even begin to repeat back any of the details of what you've just said in any kind of coherent way, because it just is so incredibly complicated.
Could I simplify it? It's people want freedom, and a dictator who is allied with, decided to ally with Obama's friend Iran, decided to try to destroy our democracy. We overthrew the dictator because we want democracy, we want freedom. And the dictator had a counter-revolution, and he has a lot of money, and he has been bribing a lot of NGOs, UN, other agencies, and Iran has been doing the same. So to the point where Human Rights Watch posted a fake report. I mean, there are lots of absolutely fake things. A fake report on Mocha. And my friend Abu Hunayd exposed this, Dr. Hunayd exposed this. And then Human Rights Watch had him kidnapped. They literally were tweeting with the kidnapper. Then he was kidnapped. Then the kidnapper tweeted to Human Rights Watch. And then Human Rights Watch came up with a statement, and he tweeted to them after I exposed the fact that he debunked a Human Rights Watch report. So, I mean, you have collusion between Western aid agencies, Western NGOs, Western journalists. We even caught, I just tweeted how a BBC journalist was telling people to lie that I am poor, my kids don't have food in Ramadan. So it's like, it's to the point where the big thing is the lying and the collusion. During the Arab Spring, when the dictator had no idea about InfoWars or anything, he was just like caught, shocked, you know, and resigned. At that time, I would send news to journalists, and they would fact check. I was even a CNN agent of change. Then with this new war, when it happened, journalists refused to fact check anything, and I'm like, well, how about fact check? If it says Saudi Arabia, probably bad. The New York Times publishes things without even checking, and we were even confronting journalists. We were like, why were you teaching us how to fact check 3 years ago, but now you don't even do it yourself? Like, what's up with that? Because, I mean, they're just like publishing libel and slander without even checking the source, when a few years ago they used to be very, very thorough. And then I noticed the same with Gamergate, is they would just publish anything that would make gamers look bad without even fact-checking. So whenever it benefits a large group of liberal journalists, they publish without fact-checking. And that's very worrying, and I was wondering why, and I looked at the statistics. In the United States, only 7% of journalists vote Republican. So 97% of journalists.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it is pretty ridiculous. I wanted to ask you something else, Maria. If you're not done, you're getting an echo for some reason though, so I'm going to mute you briefly. Because I told you this might happen. Thanks. Okay, so you were saying that much of the media has been lying about what's going on in Yemen, much in the same way that they've been lying about Gamergate. I mean, obviously we're talking about very different stakes here, but very similar practices and very similar sort of ethical, basically different standards, or very similar ethical standards, where you have people that have a certain political belief system or ideology, and they're using it to dictate how they're going to proceed with journalism, how they're going to inform the public. And these are supposed to be the people that we trust to tell the truth. So what I would also ask is this: much as in Gamergate, when it comes to much of the liberal or left-wing media, they have obviously smeared the shit out of them, dragged them through the mud, and just called them the worst kinds of people. And they have been really, really intentionally misleading. And then they also claim ignorance when you point it out, as happened when we went to South by Southwest last week. There was a BBC guy there that said, well, I would talk about Gamergate, but I just don't know what it is, or I don't know enough about it. If you could point me in the right direction, and all this bullshit, which we know that, you know, if he really wanted to, he could have done the work by now. It's called journalism.
Oh, no, he didn't just say that, though. He said he would talk to Gamergate, and he has talked to Gamergate, but then people called him an idiot, and therefore he just doesn't want to talk to them anymore.
Yeah, because he's like, well, they called me a name, so therefore I don't really need to report on it. And but that's the left-wing media. But the right-wing media doesn't even acknowledge the existence of Gamergate or they use it as a way to sort of counter the left-wing media. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have Gamergate's best interest in every case. So my question is to you, Maria: have you looked to see there isn't in the West, at least in the United States, there isn't a lot of right-wing media, but as you pointed out, with the percentage of people that tend to be more on the left is way higher in journalism. Has there been more honesty in terms of reporting on Yemen coming from other media sources, or is it more like radio silence and from other places that might be trying to find the truth? Does that make sense? You can unmute yourself by clicking the...
Okay, sure. Sources that have not been lying so much, Ukrainian media, Euromaidan, and they go to left and right. They're like center. So far we had luck with Arabia, the Saudi channel, and I think Gamergate, that's another way. Ukraine and Saudi are two other media channels where, yeah, with the right, I mean, like, yeah, if you pin yourself as a right-wing cause, you get a lot of people labeling whatever mistakes Sarah Palin has. They say, oh, that's you, and you're like, I am not Sarah Palin, So, yeah, I definitely see there is really a huge problem with the media bias. And it's not just Gamergate, it's like, it's more than one country and it's more than one group. I do think, and by the way, about BBC, the same journalist was lying about Yemen, okay? He was completely saying false things about Taiz, and I'm from Taiz, and he was saying like that Saudis were bombing the houses of their allies' civilians. I mean, like, come on, they have precision weapons, they wouldn't do that. And we know they didn't do that. And then when we confronted them, they said, okay, we'll do a report on Aden. So they did a report on Aden, and again, they twisted all the facts to try to make Saudi look bad again, as opposed to saying, okay, I am here in Aden, what is going on? And they used to actually do journalism on Aden during the revolution, before they got any bribes. In the revolution in 2011, 2012, they actually did good journalism, asking good questions. By bribes, I don't mean bribes, but I mean the lobbying is that they do a favor here, a favor there, and journalism is dead. There is an excellent Israeli writer, Thomas Victor, who has actually been covering Yemen, and he has been covering media inaccuracies in several countries, Yemen included. So it's quite a phenomenon, and I think we have to do more to show that you cannot trust all those sources because they have an agenda. And in the Soviet Union, the good thing is but I'm half Russian, we didn't believe our own media. We understood that they were lying, that they had an agenda. We read between the lines, we checked out other sources. And I do think the problem with the United States and the West is people put too much trust in establishment. Establishment in any country is going to protect itself and lie. So, I mean, so we do have to expose that and show people, yes, you have to go and find your own news. Look at other sources. The best thing we can do out of this is to undermine people's trust in establishment media, because establishment media will protect itself. As for right-wing media, yes, it also protects itself. So it's good to have multiple sources and to teach people to not use just one source.
Yeah, or basically find a way to entertain ideas from all sides without actually being converted by them, unless you are doing so based on all the evidence that's put before you. It's all about learning how to think, which, I mean, I can go into a whole thing about how, or at least in the States, our public education system teaches people how to not think, but yeah, there's no need to go into that. But that's probably all related too.
Teaches them what to think, not how to think. I do want to point out that a lot of the sort of the claims that you're making here, Maria, are they would probably seem to just like mainstream people to be extremely outlandish and sort of unbelievable. And I would maybe feel that way myself if I hadn't been through my own journey in the media. to do with misrepresentation and just misrepresentation of my views, things that I've said, positions that I take. You know, a 45-minute interview that I do that's boiled down to a half sentence quote mine taken out of context and spun in such a way to completely negate everything else I said in that interview. And then this is why I think people with my background, which is anti-feminism and men's advocacy, found Gamergate so compelling, was because we were seeing the exact same patterns. Again, just like you said, same pattern with Yemen. Oh, I stumbled across it. They were doing the same thing in Gamergate. So it just really, really is this. Things become less unbelievable the deeper I go into, you know, looking into how the media reports on things. So yeah, no, 2 years ago I might have been skeptical about your claims, but now I'm thinking, you know, there's probably something to this.
There's probably something worth looking into. They did the same thing with the men's rights movement. They did the same thing with just like men's groups in general. Like, you know, they still go after and conflate MRAs, MGTOW, and PUAs all the time, and their goal is essentially to make them look as bad as possible. So, and of course, that I think makes people curious. In fact, I think in many ways, the MRAs that came to the side of Gamergate did so because they saw the tactics as tactics that they had themselves faced in the past, where the media went after them and misrepresented them and tried to make them look like terrible people. In every instance, under, you know, because they do have an agenda, or at least a worldview that they want to show people, preserve. So
the same thing happened to me. But here at least they sent trolls after me, and they sent trolls after activists like me. They twisted everything, but I kept fighting and looked for allies, and this is how I'm just bringing more and more groups together. And yeah, that's what I saw when I used actually examples of, because Houthis are using SJW tactics, and so I've actually looked at other activism like Alinsky methods, other things that have been used against MRAs. I have actually been using this to debunk Houthi propaganda, which has been really, really useful. I'm really grateful to both Gamergate and the MRA movement, because when they post tactics that are exposed, the Houthis and social justice warriors work together, especially the notorious Rouge al-Wazir, a lesbian rights Houthi terrorist activist based off of first DC and then New York City. So, and she was with Code Pink, Occupy Wall Street, you name it. So they're using the same tactics as well. So Houthi terrorists and feminists use the same tactics. So everything published on Feminists, I was able to get people to say, no, this person, this is Alinsky Rule 12, that's how they're trying to defame them. This is in the manual, this is this other tactic in the manual, etc. So it was really great and useful actually for Yemen, so we'd like to thank you for that.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's actually when you sort of look at propaganda wars and all of those things, the entire object of doing those things is to engage people's emotions, shut their brains off.
Yes.
And get them onto your side, polarize their views as much as possible, shift the Overton window, right, in order to exclude the other side altogether. And the other side that used to be the middle, right? It used to be the centrist position. Now they're the ones who are the radicals. They're the ones who are so ridiculously radical, and it's now our new extremely polarized position that is the mainstream centrist norm. Yeah, no, that's how that all works. So yeah, it's absolutely it plays on human psychology. It plays on the the part of neuroscience that has shown that when people's emotions are engaged, their logic centers are inhibited, and the other way around. And so the more emotional you are about a topic, the less reasonable and rational you are able to be about it. So yeah, it's actually really scary how they can.
Ukrainians call it intellectual castration via emotions.
Yeah.
I've also spent a lot of time with Ukrainians. That's another group that is excellent in breaking down this propaganda. A lot of the feminists use Marxist propaganda from back in the 70s when Soviet Union was helping a lot of like radical leftist groups there. And Ukrainians have been fighting Russians who now try to use, with Putin, his ex-KGB, right? So he's trying to make Russia rise up, like make the Soviet Union back. That's his rhetoric, right? So a lot of the anyway, Ukrainians are fighting Russia, and they've been succeeding in the information war space. They've even been succeeding in the war, and so a lot of the counter propaganda tactics against SJWs and Houthis, of course, some we have been using from the MRA movement and from Gamergate. The other tactics that we have been using are Ukrainian tactics, and they very much say the exact same thing. It's psychological warfare. I did study intelligence and national security at Mercyhurst University. I also studied media relations, so psychops, psychological warfare is a topic of study that I'm very fascinated in.
Wow.
Since we're on the topic of human rights, I want to ask the next question. You are described in Wikipedia as having been involved with women's rights advocacy, but you are also always arguing with feminists and criticizing their practices on Twitter. And earlier you said that something about feminists not representing what feminism was at one time. Could you expand on that for us?
Yeah, I'm a women's rights activist. I'm a very strong women's rights activist, and I believe feminism is a form of Marxist slavery, and I advocate empowering women and men by removing feminism and Marxist slavery because it's BS. It has nothing to do with feminism. It's the same as anti-Semitism, where the Houthis run around saying, "That's the Jews! That's the Jews! That's the America!" And they're blaming America for the fact that they stole everything and are poor now. And they spend all the money on drugs, prostitutes, and alcohol, and cut. And then they're saying, the problem is the Jew! The feminists are the same. They always blame everything on patriarchy. It's a cult. It has nothing to do with women's rights. And instead of supporting... So, you know, as an Arab women's rights activist, I saw them silent on rape in Syria. And then when the rapists, Syrian professional rapists, went to Europe in herds, instead of asking Europe to screen for rapists, they defended the rapists and told the women to cover up. I'm like, what the hell is that? And that was one of the moments where I'm like, feminism is not women's rights activism, and I have far more in common in the West with men's rights activists than I have with feminists, because there are a lot of laws, I think, like divorce laws that oppress men, and let's be honest, you know, there are a lot of practices that oppress men, and I am for human rights for everyone, and I will, if there is somebody who is abusing somebody, being a bully, I will speak out for that. In the West, feminists abuse men. They also enslave and imprison women and prevent women from reaching their goals, including marriage. They do everything they can to make it impossible for a woman to find a husband who loves her if that is indeed her goal. Because who would want to marry Big Red or a short-haired, angry, screaming feminist? Like, nobody.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not just sorry, echo. It's not just the idea that feminism is sort of socializing women into being these sort of loud, screaming harpies. It also it's sold women a bill of goods in terms of their fertility and their expectations of you know, sort of how to plan your future to get the maximum gain. And for most women, that would be to maybe go to college or university, but maybe partway through, set your education aside. You've met that man who's got very good future potential. You care about each other. You love each other. Get married. Have your kids when you're young, when you're the healthiest, when you have the most energy to take care of them, when they aren't going to end up with Down syndrome or any other massive complications, when you aren't going to have to spend $10,000 at a fertility clinic to do it, right? Get them, wait till they're in school, then go finish your degree, start your career. You'll still be behind, but you won't face 2 years of retraining after putting in a full 4 years, or upgrading after putting in a full 4 years and getting your degree and paying for all that. And you're never going to have the same outcome in terms of income and career aspirations as a man if you want to have children and if you plan on taking more than 6 weeks off for each child out of the workplace. You are never going to have everything a man can have, right? So why are we telling women, get your degree, get your career, work yourself up to the point where you're like at your peak, then drop out for 5 years, right? And then try and salvage what's left of a career once they go. Like, why would you do that? And you know, and you're trying to do this with a special needs kid or a kid who was premature or after spending $10,000 just to get pregnant and have a baby, right? Why would you? This information, this proposal, this projected life trajectory that feminists are convincing young women is the way to go. This is not a recipe for happiness, especially since when you're young and attractive, that is when you will be able to make the best possible. Like, how many women at age 35, now they're desperate, their biological clock is ticking, and the guy that is interested in marrying them, they're stuck there thinking, well, he's not as good as the 7 guys I dumped in my 20s.
Yeah, you know, I agree and disagree with you. And again, this is coming from a Yemeni background. I think it's true. At the same time, women do need to have a bit of a backup if the husband gets sick, there is a divorce or something. You never know, husbands die, etc. So I do think women should not go to university because university is BS. You don't get anything practical out there. But to a college, get something practical. Have a practical skill like a secretary, a plumber, whatever, and work 1 or 2 years in something practical. Find the guy, drop out, have your kids early, and if something happens, you have a skill that you can rely on because things do happen. And then after your kids are old enough, that's when you go and do your medical degree or a lawyer or whatever you want. And you're right, if you have kids, you are not going to have the same career as a man. I mean, we have to tell women to be honest and, you know, pick their choices. Like, what do they want for themselves, you know? And what's more important, the other thing with, we have to stop lying about the wage gap. The reality is, most women prefer to spend time with kids than to be a CEO. And there is nothing wrong with that. I am one of the more career women thing, but in Yemen what we do is we praise women who are a mother and they cook things from scratch. We think it's awesome. And if a woman is successful with her career, we think it's awesome. But, you know, I think it's a disservice that we don't compliment housewives. We don't compliment girls who do things in the home. You know, our culture, if a woman stays home with the kids, in the West, people say negative things. So there has to, and also back in the Middle East, there is a huge, it's not so individualist, there's a huge social network to help women who are working. Their mothers, their grandmothers, there's a community, people go to a mosque or church or a synagogue, you know, and that mosque, church, or synagogue serves as a community center, there's help with babysitting, that sort of stuff, where if you don't have like a religious institution as a community center, like, it's hard to get babysitters. So exactly, we're selling women things, we're selling women bullshit.
It's, you know, I do agree with you that this whole idea of the domestic arts being completely devalued by feminists is sort of in this idea that how could you just be happy staying at home and raising kids? Well, when my kids were young, not so much when they were school age, but when they were very, very small, I used to reach a state of zen-like bliss folding diapers, and I used cloth diapers, and not the fancy ones with the Velcro tabs, but like the ones that you had to fold into the proper shape and pin, because we were poor. And that was what I had to do in order to save enough money to be able to stay home with my kids, which was what I wanted to do. And there is an art to cooking from scratch, to running a household on an extremely limited budget. You have to get creative in terms of how you shop, how you spend money, what you spend on, what you buy in what week, and how much of it, and the whole bit. And you can actually, as somebody living under the poverty line like I was, you can actually eat steak twice a week with your family and still make your bills. It's the most amazing. And nobody seems to think of that kind of creativity, that kind of being able to juggle priorities, that kind of work ethic, that kind of willingness to sacrifice certain things. I'm gonna pick up furniture free from the curbside, buy $100 worth of fabric and $20 worth of staples, and reupholster it rather than spend $1,000 on a new sofa. Right? Those kinds of things that women can do, that my mother did, that my grandmother did. Those kinds of things can be extremely, they have cash value in terms of making you financially able to stay at home and look after your kids and not put them in daycare. And so, we don't look at those things as, sort of the plucky, spunky, or, she's got chutzpah, she can do it, this can-do attitude, that feminist poster, the iconic feminist poster, we can do it. Sometimes that's what housewives do, especially among people who are low income, to be able to actually be staying home with their kids, teach their kids how to read before they're 2 years old, all of those things. Get them a head start before they're even off to school. And so, we've devalued all of that. We've essentially said, oh, well, but that couldn't possibly be fulfilling, right? You couldn't possibly get a sense of accomplishment out of that. Well, I don't know. The first time I saved myself $1,000 and upholstered a piece of used furniture, just going by what I learned from a book, I certainly felt a sense of accomplishment. I saved myself $1,000 and I did it through my own sweat and my own ingenuity. So, I don't we don't look at that as anything worth celebrating anymore, and we just sort of see it as this way that women stagnate and they don't grow themselves, and they don't accomplish anything, they don't achieve anything when they stay home with their kids. And I think that that's just really sad.
I think yes and no, in the sense that it's very fulfilling, and I think it's really wrong that feminists go and say that it's not. Of course it's fulfilling. At the same time, when we have the one-size-fits-all model, where we force all women to stay at home or all women to work, this is when, of course, there will be a group that doesn't fit the model who gets not very happy. When everyone had to be a housewife, of course, some housewives were not very, happy. And then when we are supposed to make all women work, of course, you have a large group who won't be fulfilled. I think we have to, like what I see in Yemen, what I really like is we accept both women who stay at home and have ingenuity. And I think that's freaking awesome how he managed to save $1,000 on that couch. Wow. I think that deserves an applause, It's just that sort of thing. That should be seen as awesome, as well as, hey, if somebody got a promotion at work, that's also awesome. It's what, we stopped thinking about freedom, and that's why I'm against Marxist feminism. It's totalitarian. It's against women's freedom of choice. I don't want to be a housewife. At the same time, I support women who want to be housewives, because my friends who want kids, if you force them to like not have kids and the whole career thing, they are very sad and upset. I mean, we have to empower all women and all men to achieve their dreams, whatever their dreams may be.
Yeah, I was
And
just going to add in
feminism
that
is totalitarian.
I was just going to add in that it also ignores it ignores the downsides or drawbacks of men also having all their choices laid out before them. It doesn't celebrate some of those choices, like say a man wants to be a stay-at-home dad. You know, feminism doesn't really celebrate that. Doesn't really think that that's worthy of acknowledgement in some positive way. And it also ignores that there is some biological realities that have to be faced if a man does choose to, like say he wants to be a stay-at-home father or he wants to be like a house husband. There are some actual potential consequences of doing that with his relationship. You know, because feminists ignore biology as well. So.
Well, I think you mean they ignore evolutionary psychology.
Yeah.
That in general, when men stay at home and are house husbands, they have to be doing something else. They have to be acquiring some sort of status or external, you know, admiration. If you look at Stefan Molyneux, he's an excellent example of that. He is the stay-at-home father for his child, but he has a massive YouTube following. He is looked up to by huge numbers of people. He brings in money through that. And I think that if he wasn't doing that, his wife would not be as happy with him as she seems to be, because there is something about the sort of hypergamous nature of women wanting to marry across or up social hierarchies, and becoming dissatisfied if they have to settle for someone who is below them in the social hierarchy. And that doesn't, like feminists predicted, that as women became economically independent and more economically secure and more able to make their own way and become wealthier in their own right, that tendency would actually decrease. But what studies have found is that the tendency actually increases. The wealthier a woman is, the more hypergamous she is, the more unwilling she is to marry down below her station, below her social status, and the less willing she is to marry down, the more insistent she is that the man that she chooses to be with has the same level of success as her, the same or greater income than her, and all of those things. And so essentially what you have is a whole a huge amount, and Jordan Peterson at University of Toronto mentioned this, is that the more successful, the more intelligent, the more economically independent a woman is, the smaller the pool of men is that she's willing to consider as a long-term partner. And that's why for every 15 points a woman's IQ goes up, the pool of her partners, potential partners, shrinks by something like 50%. And it's not because of the men necessarily. It's because she now has essentially priced herself out of the market. She's now in a buyer's market. She's made herself into a buyer in a buyer's market rather than a seller in a seller's market. So these are things that feminism does not want to look at. It does not want to acknowledge that these things exist and that they exist independent of the political environment in any given place, right? So
that's absolutely true. Feminism ignores evolutionary biology. And what you hit upon is very true. I mean, I had a hard time because I don't want to boast, but I do have an IQ that's higher than 100, right? So I needed an intelligent man. It took me longer to find my husband, and I'm very happy with him. He's a wonderful, smart man. But it took a while. However, if I were less intelligent, because for me there were some guys who were not had a lower IQ than me, and much lower IQ, and I was not sexually attracted to them. They were really nice, they were really wonderful, but I felt like they were my sister, So my husband, he was very much a manly man, and at the same time, he was very smart. So, and we had a lot in common. This is the problem is, yes, like the smarter a woman is, women have to acknowledge the reality. I had to acknowledge I had to spend a lot more time looking and finding somebody smart. The pool is of people I am physically attracted to is actually smaller because of my IQ. And men who are smart don't mind having a wife with a somewhat lower IQ. But yeah, I am physically just not attracted to men who are much dumber, which is my biology.
I actually really want to say that I really like that you said he's manly, because masculinity, like in a really sort of like, traditional sense, or what we think of when we think of masculinity, is it's very much under attack by the media, by feminists, by Marxists, etc. And so to hear someone just say, "Hey, I like him because he's a man," like just being masculine is something that obviously women like in general, but the media and all and academia and activists, they want us to believe otherwise. They want us to believe that is unattractive, and that men should not do that, and they should, I don't know, do all this other stuff,
It's attractive, and women who don't believe manliness is attractive are lying to themselves. They are liars, and this is part of why feminism is a form of slavery. It makes women lie to themselves, and then they don't get where they want, and then they blame the patriarchy, right? This is the same thing as anti-Semitism. And this is Russia not Russia, but the USSR back in the day. It used psychops. It had a team of psychologists. It wanted in the 70s to break America within through propaganda and so on. The Soviet Union is gone, but those people that it nurtured now have become the mainstream academia. I mean, it was created to make Americans too weak to fight. Just a quick example. In summary, imagine you have a caveman, like a Houthi caveman, right? With a big club, right? And then you have an American with a laser gun. Who's going to win? American with a laser gun. Now, the Houthi is smart, right? He basically goes to the laser gun person's wife or his girlfriend, and then he convinces her to emasculate him so that Mr. Laser Gun would be too afraid to touch his laser gun and fight. And then the caveman whacks the woman and whacks the man in the head with the cave and wins.
Yeah, no, it really is. It's hilarious. It's hilarious how like it is this sort of dirty little secret that nobody's allowed to admit anymore. That there are things that women want. On the whole, there are obviously exceptions, but that for the most part, women want certain things out of a male partner, and they're going to remain attracted to their partner based on his ability to convey those traits, to express them, and that it's not okay to even talk about, let alone admit, because we're all supposed to like the whole Alan Alda sort of stereotype. That's what we supposedly want in a man, is Alan Alda. Well, I'm sorry, the only reason anyone liked Alan Alda was because he was a filthy rich actor, right? He had status, even though he was like a milquetoast. He had a certain status. That's why Woody Allen gets laid. Woody Allen, if he was just some schlub going to work as an accountant every day, he wouldn't get laid either.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Now, you two touched on a very important point, and this is why feminists have this love for terrorists, which is a huge problem in my country. They can't find a thug they don't want to hug, and they sympathize with them and lie for them. And I was wondering for a while, and I think I figured it out. What you touched upon by intelligence, etc., women want a man at their level. If a woman, biologically, you want someone who is protective of you, right? My husband is physically taller than me, and physically larger, and physically stronger, and that's sexy, right? I mean, like, I'm honest with myself. He's bigger, and he can protect me, right? There's no reason for him to protect me, but that's physically attractive. I'm going to admit that, right? I'm not going to lie to myself.
Exactly.
Now, for a feminist, if you saw a big red, some kind of harpy like that, I mean, who is only more aggressive than her? She has to find somebody more aggressive so she feels protected, feminine, and physically attractive. The only person that I would know like this in the world, two people, Houthis and ISIS. Like, the only people are Islamist terrorists. And I was wondering for a while, why are they always trying to fight Muslims, like regular Muslim guys, saying like, oh, terrorism is bad, and then they go and attack us on Twitter. They go and attack Muslims on Twitter. And I'm like, whoa, why are you defending like terrorists and attacking Muslims? What the hell is wrong with you? And now I think that's actually the levels of aggression, is why they sympathize with terrorists, and they deliberately mix up Muslims with Islamists. So, for example, after terrorist attacks, there are usually huge protests of Muslims saying, these people are crazy, please go shoot and kill them, right? And, like, how many liberal journalists cover this? They like to mix them up. I was always wondering why, but I really understand, and I was wondering why they were bringing all these not screening for terrorists in Germany. And all the Syrians, like my many Syrian friends, were finding the pictures of the terrorists, sending them to police, begging police to arrest the terrorists. Even Turkey reported the guy who did the Belgian shootings. Turkey knew he was a terrorist. They let EU know. Europe let him in anyway. And this is like a common problem. And I'm like, are they crazy? Why? But there's usually a method to madness. They just want terrorist boyfriends. That's why. I think that's why they're like not screening them.
I don't know. There might be something to that. I think that there's got to be something to the sort of the idea that Charles Manson probably had more women hot for him after he got convicted than before.
Yeah.
That there were women who courted Ted Bundy after he was convicted. One of them even married him after he was convicted. That there is just this need to climb up the social hierarchy through your mating choice as a woman, and if you define yourself as if the predominant traits that you have are traits like Big Red, where you are a bully and you are aggressive and all of those things, then what you would be attracted to would be somebody even more aggressive and bullying than you are. So yeah, no, there may be something to that. That's an interesting take on things. I'll have to think about that more.
Because they tend to attack us. And sorry to interrupt, about Ghomeshi. That was really interesting. All these women, feminists interested in BDSM. And for me, it's like at first I was like, okay, maybe there was something wrong with Ghomeshi, but if you do BDSM and then he actually hits you and you don't like it, how can the court even defend you? I was really surprised that the popularity of 50 Shades of Grey, but yeah, with this level of aggression of feminists, that's what they seem to be attracted to. So this is, I think the Ghomeshi case is really feminism gone wrong.
I was just gonna go to the Ghomeshi case too.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest that too.
Okay, so yeah, I thought we would talk about that. We talked a little bit about it yesterday because it's still pretty fresh in our minds and the verdict and everything. And you had some thoughts about it on Twitter. So Maria, why don't you give us your thoughts on the Ghomeshi case? I know that you were starting to go down that road already. So.
Yeah. Well, I actually survived sexual harassment in the workplace, And yeah, twice. Again, it's a very common problem in CBC, NDP, and Liberal Party in Canada, among where there's a high difference of power in liberal institutions. It's really a common problem where you don't see it in the Conservative Party, because if Ghomeshi were conservative or right-wing, he would be convicted regardless of the evidence. So it's
Really?
because the judge is liberal. Yeah, and he
No,
was.
I mean, I'm surprised that I mean, I'm not. I guess I'm not that surprised that
No,
it's pretty common in those areas. But
the,
I'm glad to hear you say it.
the difference, I think, is that that in conservative circles, there are rules,
Yes.
protocols as far as how you treat women, whether they're your mother, your sister, your daughter, or in the workplace. There are sort of hard and fast rules for the proper way to respect women, and the proper way for women to behave in order to justify that added respect, right? And I'm not necessarily arguing that that's a good thing, or that's what I would like to see happen, or anything like that, but that just those things exist within conservative circles. And in liberal circles, it's sort of like anything goes. It's and so you end up with fewer boundaries that are visible to everybody, right? When there's a rule book and all the boundaries are visible to everybody, people don't cross them. But when the boundaries are only visible to the person who objects when the boundary is crossed, and it's not visible to anyone else, then the boundaries are going to be crossed more often, and it's going to be much harder to prove that that person knowingly crossed a boundary, because the boundary wasn't laid out in a rule book.
Yes,
more
exactly. And my friends were raped, and I wasn't working for the Canadian Parliament. And it was because I followed the Muslim rule book. And then what's interesting, it's like it's a free-for-all, but if you're a woman, you're always a slut, and it's always your fault. And so they couldn't pin anything on me when basically, I just wanted to be transferred to a different office. I don't name the person I accuse because it's not about revenge. I want him to have his own little career. The only thing I'm upset is that instead of moving me to a different office, they fired me, like, for complaining. And the same thing happened to another friend. I just think that they should be able to, if you're uncomfortable with somebody you're working with, it doesn't matter why, you should be able to move you. HR should move you instead of fire you, Like, that's...
Yeah, no,
like,
I would agree with that. And this person must have been fairly high up, eh?
This person, he's basically, let's compare it to Putin's Russia, because now it's practically the same thing. So he is like the top Kremlin TV guy who makes Putin look good. So he's like the top guy that makes the liberals look good, right?
Oh.
And CBC is like, basically they're completely sold out to the campaigning to the liberals, to the point where the Trudeau said they're just sucking up too much to him. Like when the Prime Minister complained that they suck up too much to him, this is really like, I can send you more information on that. But so this is a highly partisan channel. So it's, you could argue Fox News under Bush was partisan, just multiplied by 10 and you get the CBC for Trudeau.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and so imagine under Bush's time, imagine if Bush was a liberal, okay? And it's the Fox News, and then the guy who defends Bush suddenly, turns out that he was, doing improper things in the workplace. Now, conservatives would behave one way, but if it were a liberal, it would be different. Let's look at the Roman Polanski case. That's a very clear-cut case where he raped a 13-year-old girl, and of course the liberal establishment attacked the 13-year-old girl. And the Ghomeshi case is not the only case. There are lots of other cases, and in all cases where the accuser was left-wing, the girl was always the one attacked.
Well,
when the accuser is when the guy being accused is right-wing, Like, for example, we had this Duffy guy who misappropriated $90,000. It was a huge media scandal that dragged on forever. Another guy, left-wing Mulcair, misappropriated $3 million, barely a peep in the press, okay?
Yeah.
So,
well,
like,
I would have to say, like, because I've been watching the press coverage of the Ghomeshi trial right from the beginning, and it has not been sympathetic to him. CBC fired him, and essentially, like the court's decision in this case, right? After reading the entire decision, after following the trial and reading the entire decision by the court, there is absolutely no way that the court could have found any other way, that the judge could have rendered any other verdict based on the evidence that was presented at trial and the fact that the complainants essentially took a tire iron to their own credibility on the stand willfully and persistently and repeatedly. So, like, I'm not looking at the case so much as, you know, that I don't feel like Ghomeshi got off unfairly. I still have no idea whether he did what they said he did or not. I'm not even sure I care at this point whether he is actually guilty of those things or not. I'm looking at it more as sort of a passion play about how not to take sexual assault complaints to trial. When you sort of look at the guidelines and best practices that investigators and Crown now have, that are all sort of drawn up by feminist advocates, victim advocates, right? You're not allowed to ask the victim, the alleged victim, the same question twice, because she might give you two different answers, and then you would have to account for that. So it's best to just ask her once and take that first answer as fact and not look into it anymore. If there's inconsistencies, don't follow them up, because then you're going to have to explain why they're there. And so, and also because then she might feel like she's being re-victimized or that you don't believe her. And so there's this policy now. It's an official policy. It's not written into law, but it's written into guidelines and best practices, that the victim is to be believed, that the police and the prosecutor are to come at the complaint from the position that the victim is always being truthful, and that if there's any indication that she's being untruthful or mistaken, don't follow up on it, because she will feel like you're re-victimizing her. And that makes it very, very welcoming for women to make complaints of sexual assault, but it makes it very, very difficult to win cases in actual courts, because, as happened with the Ghomeshi case, what ended up happening is the defense counsel knew a ton of stuff that the complainants had not bothered to tell the investigators or the Crown, and that the Crown and the investigators had not bothered to ask about, for fear of being insensitive to a victim and appearing like they didn't believe her. And so essentially they were blindsided by repeated persistent perjury on the part of their own complainants. And that smashed the complainant's credibility. The entire case rested on their testimony, and therefore whether or not their testimony was credible. There was no other evidence introduced as to, you know, what happened. There was no forensic evidence, no physical evidence, no nothing that was introduced by the prosecution other than the testimony of these complainants. And then all of a sudden a bunch of physical evidence gets introduced, indicating that these women are lying. They're lying about this, they're lying about that, they're lying about this. They're sticking to their lies right up until proof of that they were lying is handed to them, and they're asked to read it out in court. And, you know, like, so how on earth do feminists think that it's a good idea to treat sexual assault investigations this way?
I think they're just, again, intellectually castrated. I do think that like, for example, if I were to pursue my case, right, I would have actually not gone to criminal court. I would have gone to civil court, and because I had PTSD from it, at that time. Thankfully, I'm well now, but then I did some neurofeedback. I have some brain scans, you know. I have proof.
Yep.
And yeah, and so I hate these women because in cases like mine, but I'm not pursuing mine, but my friend's case, who she was actually physically raped, and she did tests. The police have physical evidence of her being raped by her boss, okay? And she was fired after she went to the police, and the police had collected the rest of the evidence, right? So, and the issue isn't the rape. The issue is the being fired for the rape. So, you know, and it just makes people not believe people like us. And I don't want people to believe me because I am a woman, or, you know, like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
You know, believe me because I am Aryan race, because everything is the fault of the Jews. I mean, that's how it sounds to me.
Yeah.
It's like fascism. No, I mean, people should believe evidence and facts. What I have in my case is evidence and facts that I had to pay some neurofeedback and psychology. And what I can do about my case is a civil suit where I would ask my harasser to pay the bills for the damage that my lawyer would argue he caused. And his lawyer would argue probably that, no, this was just workplace stress, etc. So, I mean, that sort of case makes total sense. I don't understand. First of all, this is a 1800s court system, right? So they're looking at Victorian morality here. Our Canadian court system is based on Victorian morality. So I don't understand how a woman who does BDSM, consentfully, and then one day he actually hits her extra hard, like, and she files for physical assault, I mean, and doesn't fully disclose the information because she, let's say the woman hypothetically wasn't lying, okay? Let's just make it hypothetical. Hypothetically, let's say that they had BDSM and then he actually hit her extra hard once and twice, and she was afraid this was abuse, right?
Yeah.
And then she said, and the rest of the relationship is consensual except for like the hitting part. Then she thinks it's abuse, and then she goes to the court and presents it. I mean, how is an 1800s court going to understand the whole BDSM? And let's say the PTSD from the fact that he hit her without using the safe word, you know, once. And she got traumatized by that. And you see, when the boundaries, feminism erodes the boundaries. Now I'm just making a hypothetical case that he is hypothetically at fault.
Yeah.
Okay? In the hypothetical case where he didn't use the safe word and he hit her extra hard and she got traumatized by that and had to take time off work and see a psychologist, take medication, blah, blah, blah. She presents this to court, right? How is the judge going to say it's just hearsay? And she had a relationship where in previous emails she consented to BDSM, and therefore even if he is guilty, I mean, how under the system is the judge going to supposed to know that this one hit was not consensual? I mean, feminism erodes the boundaries, and we have to tell women that, you know what, if you're going to do BDSM and then the man abuses you, nobody's going to believe you. You know, you have to like think straight. Also, another thing, just sorry to butt in, is about alcohol. People don't tell girls that, you know, if men drink a bit, they might get a bit horny, and that women don't have the same BMI as men. That if a guy has a beer, it's like you having 2 beers, and so women try to network. This is a big problem in Canadian Parliament. Young women try to network to get ahead, right? So young women, my female colleagues, would drink beer with the guys and try to network. They're trying to network. The guy, after having a beer or two, he thinks this girl younger than him is hot. And he thinks she's sexually interested in him. Of course she's not sexually interested in that old guy. So that's where a lot of rapes actually occur. And she is really tired by the end, hoping to get a business card or something, networking, and he offers to walk her home. On the way, she's really tired, and he just drives by his place instead of hers. And she's too tired to notice, and then she gets raped by her boss, by her colleague. Like, I've had this happen to friends. And they are raped, and physically, like, they get physical damage. They go to the hospital for this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then they take time off work, and they ask to be transferred, and then they get fired, right?
Yeah.
Had she not drank with the boss, none of this would have happened. Why we don't have the rape problem? In the Conservative Party, they tell women, this is what I've heard, they tell women, you know what? It's not your fault if some rapist rapes. At the same time, you have to do what you can to prevent, because you can't get unraped. So after, like, people often do drinks at receptions, only stay for the first half hour. After that half hour, skedaddle. You know, don't go with somebody from your event. Go with your female friend. If you have a boyfriend, leave with your boyfriend. Do not leave with someone at the event who is tipsy. Just basic safety tips for women. I have been trying to push for that. They blocked me within the Liberal Party and NDP, and they had their feminists telling women that it's okay to show mixed signals to men and get drunk. And then the girls get raped, and they're like, why did I get raped?
Yeah.
And they look at me, same guys tried to do this to me, and all I got was my harasser grabbed me.
Yeah.
And I pushed him away. Because, and he was pretending to be gay. And that's how he managed to try to trick a traditional woman. But I pushed him away, and I had no alcohol. So I was networking with Coca-Cola, right? So I was sober, and he was tipsy, and I skedaddled, and I'm okay. I have no problem. Where I know somebody, same guy, he convinced her to go to his apartment. She thought he was gay. He said, oh, you can crash on my couch, and the next morning she said she thought she slept with him, the way she looked.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so I think we have to, this lack of boundaries gets women hurt.
What I always bring up is that the law does not protect you from being raped. It doesn't. It's not like you're going to be at some guy's apartment and he starts to get fresh and you don't want to, go through with the whole thing, and suddenly there's going to be like a cop swinging through the window on a rope with his gun drawn saying, rape or no raping, right? Like, that's not how the law works. The law does not protect you from the bad act or from being violated. All it does is it gives you an opportunity and an avenue to get some kind of compensation or some recourse against him once he has done that. Once somebody has violated you, it gives you the opportunity to try through the avenue of the law, which is tricky, and there's a massive burden of proof, as there should be, to try to punish him for what he already did. It's not going to unrape you, right? The thing that will keep you from being raped is having a brain in your head, right? And using it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this is why I managed to, by following traditional Muslim Arab values, I avoided rape. And other girls actually got raped because they stifle this discussion. I wonder if it's even on purpose that they, like, I hate to say on purpose, because these rapists, they go to the feminist events and push for things that, like, we have equal voice, so all the rapists, if you want to see them on the Hill, that's in Canadian Parliament, that's the events they go to, and they push for things that are convenient for them. I don't know, I mean, they push for killing common sense. And I think it's time to teach women common sense. As for the law protects women from, after the stranger rape occurs, you cannot prevent stranger rape. If somebody is overdosing on heroin and decides to rape a grandmother, there's nothing she can do to protect that except having a gun. In the United States, I think it's the one way you can dress to prevent rape is Second Amendment, carry a gun. Like, that's kind of that when it comes to stranger rape. There is really, the only precaution is like looking more confident. That's the only thing that I've read psychologists said that can reduce chances, walking confident reduces chances of stranger rape. But most cases in the West of rape are acquaintance rape, which this is not common. Where I grew up, we didn't hear of acquaintance rape in Yemen because a girl would not go alone to the home of somebody who was not her husband, and if she did go to a home, it was with someone. So by having some kind of rules that don't go to somebody's house if you don't want to sleep with them. Like, I think that's actually smart advice, is don't go, even if you think he's gay, some guys, like in the one case I know, pretend to be gay. Don't go alone to a man's home if your intention isn't to sleep with him. And after you have slept with him, after you have gone to his house, you know, then if something happens, according to the law written in Victorian times, it's your fault. I mean, the problem is we teach women that they can't do anything and get away with anything. There is this whole slut walk thing. Let's say teach rapists not to rape. I mean, do we teach sociopaths not to be a sociopath? They are what they are. You know, serial killers, terrorists, etc. They know what they're doing is wrong. The only reason why they do it is because they feel that they can get away with it. That's why you have to have self-reliance and protect yourself. And for some reason, self-reliance drives feminists mad. I don't understand why.
Or those people, they know what they're doing is wrong, and it's not even that they feel like they can get away with it, but it's because they just don't care. I mean, like, that doesn't matter, or it's not a priority. I wanted to ask you a question. You said that your Muslim values have protected you. Can you go into that a little bit? I'm just curious, because some people in the chat were wondering what values those are that you believe have served you well to protect you from things like sexual assault.
Okay, the basic traditional values that Christians used to have, Orthodox Christians still do. You know, you go to an Egyptian Coptic church, and the girls still have those values. The value is, I married as a virgin, like no premarital sex. And that meant not going to a home of, somebody I was not engaged to, by myself. It's like alone. My husband, I had introduced him to my father, who grilled him. So he got pre-approved before I went out with him. So I think this, if he could withstand my father, and there's one person I went out with before my dad didn't like, so, and my dad was right, that's the thing, is like if you have traditional values, it gets you, I didn't drink at work events, right? So I wasn't drunk. When the guy who harassed me, he was trying everything. He thought keeping me up a bit late, but I have a certain also curfew. I don't stay up late with a man I don't know until 2 a.m. or something, when I'm too tired to think for myself. I only stood up. I was trying to network and get, see where any leads, where I can apply, which offices were hiring. So I was networking until, it sounds late, 11 o'clock, but where I was working on Parliament Hill, often the office hours were until 11. So it was, so at that point, it was a bit, for me, it may be late, but it was still like, with the light, it was still light outside, it being Canada, right? So it was light outside, and it was about 10 or 11 o'clock. But I remember it being like, it's just, the sun's just beginning to set around that time. And that's, yeah. So that's about the time but it's really a problem, when a girl, like with my friends, they got drunk, right? And they got taken advantage of, and they got drunk with men that were strangers. And drinking with strangers is, one thing that Islam says is smart. People think that there's a full prohibition on alcohol, and it's actually, it says you should not be drunk between prayers, right? So just being tipsy is fine, but don't get wasted. with people you don't intend to sleep, that really protected me like nothing else. It's like just basic common sense. It's like understanding that, you know, with a couple beers, guys get beer goggles and they might think that you're interested when you're not, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas when they're sober, they don't behave like this. So, yeah, just like having some basic traditional common sense. I think this common sense used to be in America. If you look at movies in the 1950s, the girls had the same common sense in the United States. It's like not that any different than 1950s Christian values.
Right. Well, I mean, and those things are really considered oppressive these days by feminists, like that sort of 1950s nuclear family, you know, chastity and that kind of thing. But I don't. The thing I'm thinking about is that while a lot of that makes sense, it seems to me that traditional common sense values that you're talking about in the United States, at least, I can't speak for other countries, although I'm sure that it's probably a lot of the West in general. I don't think we're ever going to get back to that. I think that in many ways that ship has sailed, and those kinds of things are just in certain like highly religious communities in some pockets, because perhaps because you know the sort of very sex positive hookup culture and all these things are really prevalent in the West, and women are not. I just don't see that in general, men and women going back to the traditional values. So we're a bit at in a bad place, because I don't think that that's going to be a solution that most people will take when we have so much premarital sex going on, and there's so, you know, people are going to parties and women are trying to be like the boys and, you know, drink as much as they do and so on. And I mean, it's not, you know, again, I'm not disagreeing with the fundamental values that you're putting out there. I'm just looking at how practical it is to actually apply them. And things like BDSM, which is what this whole Ghomeshi trial is about, they are actually what once was the fringe, which is what that was, or at least people considered it to be the fringe, is actually becoming more and more of a mainstream idea. So I wonder about that too, but that's sort of like a separate topic. But do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's the overtone window that has been shifted. And if you have a will, you can shift it back. The crazy radicals, they shifted it one way, you can shift it back. I mean, I look at Ukraine and the Ukrainian community in Canada. It's not like I have, you know, it's not like I have significantly different values. I mean, in the sense that, you know, somebody waiting for sex until they're engaged. I mean, you don't have to be like rigid things. But the fact is, having common sense and pushing for it, you know, you have to fight for your rights. They're not given free. You have to fight for what makes sense. You have to fight for everything. And those bastards on the feminist side, they fought for their crazy stuff. And if you want a normal life, nothing comes free. You have to fight for it. You have to make it cool. You see how they make it cool. And the thing is, we have to let people be upfront. If you're going to have a life, let's call it what it is. Like, the Ghomeshi trial was a trial about debauchery. And debauchery is confusing. If you engage in it and you get hurt, the cops are not going to help you, because there is no legal system in the world that can police debauchery, because debauchery is so complicated. And what I mean by debauchery is when you throw all the lines out, when you throw out the boundaries. If you don't want to get hurt, then you have to have boundaries. You don't have to have Saudi Arabia, but, you know, you can have boundaries. And you look at Ukrainians, Ukrainian Orthodox, they do go to church. At the same time, it's more relaxed. It's not, you know, I understand when people see Southern Baptists, they're like, oh my God, I don't want that. That makes total sense. But you could have something like Ukrainian Orthodox, Coptic. There are some early Christian traditions where they're chill, and like the youth take their priests to like campus stuff, and it's a community. I think the problem in the US is the church. the church has really stopped being so much of a community thing and instead has adopted modern marketing practices, and it sounds like an MLM seminar, convert to Jesus, and that becomes devoid of spirituality. And I do see that, yes, people look at the church in the US, if you look at like Jehovah's Witnesses, people trying to convert, I'm like, that's not the point. You convert through your actions, you know? You live a decent life, people see you're successful, you're happy, that in your community there are children running around happy, there are old people who are happy, everyone's together helping each other. People will want to be a part of that community and will convert to be a part of that. I mean, it's your actions that make people want to follow you, not an MLM seminar. I think like reintroducing early Christianity, whether it's Ukrainian Orthodox, whether it's Coptic Russian, sadly it's fake. I am part Russian, and it's like the Putin tried to bring back the KGB church. The church, they killed everyone. So the old church is dead. But if you look at traditions that have preserved past the test of time, where people are chill, you know, I don't think people would want to turn American to Saudi Arabia, you know? And I do see like some of the Southern Baptists as very similar in that regard, and something like, yeah, going to a mild form of orthodoxy may help, including Orthodox Judaism for Jews, etc. I mean, you know, the church, the mosque, it should be a community. And that's the start. I also think when we look at this, part of it is the fact that the church failed when the church adopted secular practices of MLM marketing.
I think too part of the reason why a lot of the sort of the faiths that engage in some segregation of men and women, and you see this kind of segregation in hunter-gatherer societies, you see it in early societies, early pagan societies and all of that, right? That there was some segregation of men and women in terms of women had their sphere and men were told to keep out, and men had their particular things and women were told to keep out, even if they weren't segregated from each other all of the time. But I think that one of the big disservices feminism did was it portrayed those forms of sort of masculine community and feminine community as an injustice against women. That the injustice was that women were kept out of masculine spheres. There was no injustice about men being kept out of feminine spheres, but that women were being intentionally kept out, and that so that even when you get to like the segregation in Jewish Orthodoxy, where if you're segregating one sex, you're segregating them both. You just are, and yet they've portrayed this consistently as an injustice against women, that they've been segregated from activities that men engage in, without any understanding of maybe why that segregation is in place, and that or any consideration of the fact that this is an equal injustice. It's equally keeping men segregated. It's not just keeping women segregated from men, it's also keeping men segregated from women. And it just like they've turned it into this big, huge form of misogyny that needs to be completely eradicated, when, in my opinion, it's completely valid to have to maybe encourage certain things, like, say, the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. I think the Girl Scouts have every right to remain all girl. I think the Boy Scouts have every right to remain all boy. And I think we should be allowed to have women-only gyms, and we should also be allowed to have men-only gyms, and all of those things. And, you know, but the whole idea of this sort of separation, even just like on the most marginal bounds, that there are some things, right, that the women retire to the salon after dinner while the men stay around the dinner table smoking cigars and drinking whiskey, which was what used to sort of happen 100 years ago in the West. That's no longer okay, right? It's no longer okay to have those things. The women, and it's not like the men are demanding to go into the salon with the women. It's the women who are demanding to intrude on the men and their time together, and it's so fucking frustrating.
Yeah,
And they've politicized everything.
Yeah, I found something really fascinating. So early Orthodox Church, like Copts, they actually segregate. And you know what's interesting? They have more kids and happier families. It's and that I don't believe that you have to be again ISIS or Hezbollah stan where like everything is absolutely segregated. No, but I do think it creates something super healthy. We have a feminine and a masculine culture. And I appreciate that aspect of my culture as a Yemeni because with the information war, what ends up happening is girls together, they have this very nurturing thing. And like we have warrior women, where I'm from, we're famous for our warrior women in Taiz, Yemen, right? But so this is why I appreciate the segregation, and many Taizi women do, who are warrior. So there are housewifey and then there are warrior. Most women are the housewife type. I'm from the warrior, basically, group of women. And it's great when men have their time together. It creates a sense of masculinity, fighting energy. Whereas girls are always trying to sympathize with someone who may actually be bad. Like often, like within group discussions, there where it looks like there may be a traitor, you know. And the girls, because somebody's being neutral. For example, somebody's like, oh, I'm anti-Houthi, and I'm anti-Saudi, I'm anti the Allies, and I'm anti the Axis. And I'm like, no, you're bloody neutral here. Like, you are hurting both sides, you know? Pick a side and stick to it, or we will both attack you. You know, in war, you can't have somebody who's all neutral humanitarian. And the girls are like, oh, but she's my friend. And having a masculine sphere is great because the boys back me up and say, hey, no, this person is creating a problem for the war effort. I am sorry, lady. Go back to your sewing. You know? And
go back to your
you know,
sewing.
I have to tell them that.
Yada.
You know, it's like there are women who are great at humanitarian things, and they should be focusing on charities, fundraising, orphans, dealing with babies, you know, because when it comes to war, this is where you see how the division works. There are women who are emotional, and they should not be in charge of anything that requires, you know, staying cool, like in warfare, right? They should be in charge of humanitarian things. They are an amazing nurse. I'd suck at being a nurse. The person would be crying, and I'd tell them to shut up. You know, I'd probably kill the person with my attitude. I am very much a warrior, so I probably suck. I am not the most nurturing person, but I do try. I do make an effort. My husband hasn't divorced me yet, so it's good. I'm learning. But you know, this is not my forte. If I were a kindergarten teacher, I'm sure all the kids would have PTSD by now, you know? So I have a lot of respect for nurturing women because like or even, for example, you're saying as a mother, like, I couldn't do it. I'd screw up my kids, you know? And I think we should really value that mothering skill, but say this is not the same as a warrior. And it's good to let men have their space. And as a woman, it's really good for me to see other nurturing women, and I learn from that. And I guess that's why my husband haven't divorced me. I haven't turned into a like total like you know, frigid guy or something.
Oh, yeah, no, I hear you. I will say that I was never the the sort of the gushing helicopter mom. I was more the kid would hurt himself and I'd just be like, oh yeah, mind that you don't do that. And you know, just sort of just like I was never the mother who was like, oh my God, you hurt yourself. No, I was just like, okay, I know it hurts. Everybody knows it hurts. You can stop crying now, right? So I was never quite that kind of mom, but at the same time, I was the I don't think my kids feel like they got cheated out of anything for it. I think that they learned how to cope with the world because I was, you know, I was more interested in stopping the bleeding than consoling their crying, right? I was always more interested in that. So yeah, I think it, but the whole idea of masculine and feminine energies, and having them be applied to things that they are suited to. I think you really have a point there, and I think that women in the 50s, women in the 60s in the U.S. and Canada, I mean, it's not like women who were housewives in that time, and it's not like women were housewives all through history. The 50s and the 60s, the post-war period, was like a unique period in the West in that there was a huge class of women who were able financially to stay at home because we had this massive, unprecedented period of expanding prosperity and an expanding middle class. And it became a point of pride to a man whose father was unable to allow his wife to stay home and raise the kids, because most of these men, their fathers' wives worked. My grandmother worked. My grandmother always worked. My mother was able to stay home with us from the time my sister was born in 1964, and I turned 10 in 1980, right? So she was able to stay at home for that entire length of time because of that expanding middle class. So it was a unique period, and men took it as a point of pride that their wives didn't have to go out and work. And women in suburban communities at that time, they weren't just looking after their homes. They were volunteering for their church. They were being block parents. They were volunteering for, we had neighborhood block parties. We had neighborhood barbecues. We had all kinds of things going. They volunteered for the PTA. They went and on their kids' school field trips as chaperones. They did all kinds of things. Raised money for charity, canvassed for the Kidney Foundation, right? They did all kinds of things in order to feel fulfilled, feel useful, contribute to their communities, contribute to society. And so I think that it's this, I think all of that work now, right? Because when you go into these neighborhoods that I grew up in, right? The neighborhood that I grew up in, that was there were full houses during the day. There was always someone at home at every single house on the entire block, right? You could go up to any house, knock on the door, and say, "I'm in trouble. I scraped my knee," and you'd get a Band-Aid at any time of the day. There were always kids outside playing. There were always people talking over the fence and all of that stuff, right? You go into these same communities now, and they're absolutely deserted. The people don't know their neighbors' names, right? They certainly couldn't, you'd never know that your neighbor had suffered a loss and that maybe his wife just died. I'm going to bring him a casserole. You'd never know that because you don't know anything about him. You don't even know his fucking name, right? And so we've lost something really amazing in these communities, and everybody thinks that it's covered now by the government, right? All of this sort of effort that women used to go to bind these communities together and help people out when they were in need, I'm going to get my husband to not just shovel our driveway and sidewalk, but the driveway and sidewalk of the elderly infirm couple who live next door, right? That doesn't happen anymore, right? All of that is now, that's the government's issue. We don't need to deal with any of it. We don't need to know our neighbors. It's all fine. And I think that we've lost something really amazing.
It's scary because the whole point of communism is to make people rely on the state, and then the state can easily control you. And that's actually fairly scary. That's how totalitarianism works. So there has to be some awareness about that. What I like about Yemen is that it's a mixed system. Some women decide to work. A lot of women decide to stay at home, and both are okay. And I think, you know, it's good to have a dialectic, like not all one way, not the other way, but to have some women who want to stay at home to say this is a good thing, this is awesome. Some women are housewives, and yes, it is very fulfilling. I've seen friends who are, they like I have cousins who are housewives, they're super happy. I am happy not being one, and both are equally good. We also have to question what this 70s communism is doing to our country, because when we look at the point from the 70s, Russia wanted to destroy the West from within. The USSR is gone, but the people that the USSR nurtured in order to destroy the United States from by crushing the morale of military men, which was the whole point. I do have a YouTube channel where I talk about these things, but yeah, on YouTube at Maria Al-Masani. But you can actually look at the fact that people who were agents to subvert America, according to the 1963 Congress report, these people, instead of going in jail, these people are now our government.
There you go.
All right. Well, actually, Maria, it was a really great conversation. I'd like to ask you if you'd be willing to come back on sometime for another fireside chat. Does that interest you at all?
Sure.
Great. I want to thank you for your time. Maybe next time we could, if you're willing, I was thinking about looking at things like Islam and the events at Cologne and stuff. I know that that's always a great topic for people. Like
That's actually awesome, because like the feminists love Islamists and like to attack law-abiding Muslims and try. Basically, they're trying to use Islam as a cover for bringing their Islamist boyfriends. They're using us as human shields, and I always go on Twitter and a bunch of other Muslims. We're going and saying we're not your shield feminists for your terrorist boyfriends. Forgive my language. They just want terrorist cock, and we have enough of being used as human shields for terrorist cock.
All right. No, yeah. Don't worry about the language. You know, if you ever feel the need to cut loose, just do it. We're just as bad, if not worse.
F-bombs. Oh my God, no, we're like 100 times worse. I was watching my language in this one just because I wasn't sure. But yeah, no.
Yeah.
No need to watch around here.
Go nuts. And so, okay, so Maria, I want to thank you again for coming on. If you could be so kind, give me a link to your YouTube channel. I'll put it in the low bar so people can check you out. And thanks, Karen, for coming on and engaging in this conversation. And yeah, I mean, you guys that are watching, you know, you know that we like to bring different people with different views on the Fireside Chat just to sort of like find out where they're coming from, and it's always good to entertain other you know, perspectives. So if you have any thoughts, just leave us a comment, like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and yeah, feed the badger. I think that that we should do a little mini shilling for Feed the Badger. So please feed the badger, because I think we got some more projects coming. The South by Southwest video is going up very soon if it's not up already. I know that we were doing that today. So yeah. So thanks again for coming. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Maria, and thank you guys in the chat for coming to the show.